So recently we did a live stream where people could ask us questions, and I couldn't get over how many people wanted to ask camera gear questions. And it's frustrating me a lot lately, the amount of even emails I got or comments on things I get about what was the gear, what was the lens, what f-stop were you at, what was this, what, and it was so heavily about the technical and the gear. And then just recently we've also done a couple of interviews, and again they keep bringing up this gear thing. So what I want to try and do is, I'm going to do my rant about my thoughts about gear. So this is sort of my collection, the gear that I'm using, and I've been collecting, trying to look at the oldest thing that's in here. Most like there's 35 years worth of gear that I've owned in here. So at first it might seem a lot, but it's not. For 35 years, and especially being professional for about 25 years of that. Some of the gear, like the stuff up there's all the video gear and gimbals and that. But down over here's my film, this is my lenses. Then there's a few bags with cameras in there. And I'm missing one camera, which is at home at the moment, which is just the Sony A1. So I have absolute shitloads of gear. And I'm here telling you it's not about the gear. So I know this sounds like a weird thing, but unfortunately you do get caught up in photography about making it about the gear. And it's only in the last year or so I've actually realized that it's only about the gear when you're not happy with the gear that you're using. And normally if you're not happy with the gear that you're using, it's not so much about how sharp it is. Well, it shouldn't be about how sharp it is and having the latest tech and that. So at the end of the day, if you want to take really good pictures, you want to be in control. So you're going to be on manual, you're not going to go into auto and things like that, especially in the field that I'm working in. I'm not talking about landscape photography, I'm not talking about birds and wildlife or sports. I'm talking about fashion, portrait, and some of my art, which I still treat, I shoot that like I shoot fashion. And my views are just based on my experience, and especially the last year that I've been really looking heavily into why do I have all of this shit. So just to break it down further, what I've realized is when I look in here is what gear hasn't been used in the last year. And if I look into this, except for the Batis lenses, which are all used for video, so all this front row comes out. This lens is mainly used for video, so that comes out. I've used this lens a little bit. I've used that lens once, and I've used that once, and I think I've used that twice. So out of what's sitting on the shelf, you can see there's very little use being out of that lot on the shelf. Then I have all my Hasselblad gear, and this gets used a little bit more because I'm commercial. If I'm doing fashion, I might be a bit wider on my 35 or my 50. I've used this very rarely, but I used this the other day and it worked really nice still. And this is my Leica bag, which just has way too many lenses. So if I just keep pulling them out, you'll just see it's way too many lenses. Like, why am I walking around with all of that stuff? So yeah, so over the last year, I've actually put a question in my head. What gear should I be carrying? And I've worked out very quickly. My favorite camera in the world is in here. The H650C. That is my favorite camera in the world, and the 80mm lens is my favorite, and my second favorite is my 100mm lens, but pretty much I can just go with my 80, so I don't have to have the 100, and if anything, the 80 just gives me a little bit more room when I'm in smaller areas. So pretty much I can shoot with that. My second best system for me, and so I can work, is a Leica SL2S, and with either the 70mm lens or a 50mm lens, and that's it. There's a reason for the two different lenses. They give me two completely different looks. The 70mm lens is an antique lens, so it gives me more of a filmic look, and the 50mm is a modern lens, gives me super sharp if I want it that way. So out of everything you can see in front of you, this here, that little bit there, is pretty much all I need to take 90% of the photos I take. And whenever I've got these in my hand, I'm super comfortable and I'm not thinking about gear. As soon as I don't have these in my hand and have a Sony or have something else in my hand, so it's easy to get onto YouTube and have all these photographers saying you need to buy a Nikon and a Canon, you need to buy the latest Fuji or a Leica or whatever. That's all good and well, but what you've really got to do is look at super famous professional people in this world and what they use. And if I just go to, say, tennis. Now, all of the tennis players, or tennis and golf, I'll use both of those, all those players are fully sponsored. But do you think that golfer with that set of ping golf clubs or the tennis player with the Wilson racket is what you can buy off the shelf? No way. That has been tuned to how he plays. Same with a cricketer if you're on Aussie or English. A baseball player if you're American. The bats of the best batters are tuned to what they want. It doesn't matter what name's written on it, it is tuned to what they want. And recently on a tennis match in Melbourne, I watched a player was going really well and all of a sudden wasn't going that well, and he got down, he's about to lose the whole game, and all of a sudden he went to his bag, grabbed another tennis racket out, and then won the next 4 points. Because obviously his racket wasn't doing what it felt like he needed it to do. But if you had handed, say, the top tennis player in the world, or grab the top 10 players in the world, and you got them to swap all their tennis rackets around between each other, they'd hate it. Because those rackets are weighted and tightened and set up the way that suits that player's style. I know this isn't sport, but you really got to bring it back to that. It's just because I like a Hasselblad doesn't mean you should buy one. It suits what I do. It's an extension of me. Whenever I pick up this thing, and I went a while last year without this, I traveled a lot without it, I really missed using this. And when I got back to using it, I just said, I'm just got to buy a couple more spares because this is my favorite camera in the world to use. I can create great photos with this. Not because this camera is the best camera in the world, it's just when I've got this in my hand, I can create. But if you gave me this little thing, even though we use this a lot for video, if something happens in front of me and I got the camera in my hand and able to shoot it, I'd still take a great picture. But I don't feel like I could create it with this in my hand. And I don't feel I could create with an iPhone in my hand. I could still take great photos. And even with the Sonys, I felt like there was never a real connect to me. The Leica has been a good connect to me and I felt comfortable. The Hasselblad feels terrible for me. And it's not just ergonomically, I just mean overall. I lift it to my eye, what I see, everything about it takes away my ability to create. So one of the problems with all of us, we all love our gear and new reviews come out. Everybody on there is saying how good it is even though they don't own it. They've been given it for an hour, but they tell you how amazing it is and you should go out and buy it and here's an affiliate link to go and buy it. If you think about it carefully, and we went through this just the other day with Beck getting a new car, was the first thing she noticed getting into a nice new car is, oh, this feels uncomfortable. She didn't feel comfortable parking it, didn't feel comfortable. It's not because the car was terrible, she hadn't got used to where the buttons were, where the knobs were, her seat position, all of those things. And a camera is very much like that. And all of you would know, the first day you have a new camera, it's like everything is hard. Nothing works, nothing's in the place. You haven't set up your menus. You haven't got used to it. You haven't worked out what you hate about it and what you like about it. Also with lenses. So before you go buying your next bit of gear, just remember, you're most likely in for a month of not taking your best photos. And really in photography, some of the best photography that's been done was 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So if the camera gear 20 years ago was good enough to take the best picture that photographer's ever taken, it's still good enough to take that same picture. So you've got to ask yourself, is it about the gear? Am I better off to keep the gear that I'm comfortable with, I'm happy with, it does everything I want? And these little bells and whistles, do I really need those things? Or is it just someone telling me I need them, and then me going out and buying them because somebody else has told me I need them, whereas if anything, I pick it up and it's not as nice as what I thought it was. So some of the photos I'm putting up now, you've got no idea what gear these photographers were using or what I was using. I'm just dropping up some nice photos. At the end of the day, the camera is not what made that photo. Some of these photos could have been taken with Nikon, Canon, Fuji. Any of those would not made any difference, but it would have made a difference to the photographer. Whatever felt the best in his hands, he's going to do the best job of capturing that moment and creating something. So I hope this wasn't too much of an anti-gear rant. If you want to see some of my other rants, I'll stick them up around me somewhere.